Okay, so let's talk about sales training. The industry itself is a $60 billion a year industry. And when it comes to the word sales training, as a sales leader, you can probably appreciate that's a fairly broad stroke in that if you were to conduct a Google search and just type in sales training, you can see it yields millions upon millions of results. And so as a decision maker for these services, whether it be sales training, leadership coaching, executive speaking, keynote speaking, and consultative work, the reality is that there's really no shortage of options for you. And that leads to a lot of question marks out there. And so if you're looking at this video, you're probably searching for some sort of sales training support. And so I want to provide you with our thoughts on, well, how do you actually buy sales training today? Because everybody will claim that they're the best, that we offer the best service, we have the greatest ROI, we have the best trainers, and look at all of these references and so forth. Very similar, I imagine, that your salespeople are doing the same thing. Well, our industry is no different. And yet, when you start to peel back the onion and you do a bit of a deeper dive and magnify it, you realize not everybody can be the best. So, how do you buy sales training? Let's take a look at the criteria right now. Criteria number one has to be the content itself. You want to make sure that if you're going to invest in an organization, that the content hits the mark, that it's a bullseye, that it resonates with the people that are going through the program, it fills the gaps that you were looking to fill, and it is going to be overall well received by the audience members that you're going to put through the training, number one. You want to make sure that the organization out there that is offering the content really are subject matter experts. If you go on a company's website and you see a laundry list of every offering under the sun, I'm not necessarily suggesting that they're not good at it, but it probably means that they haven't trained some of the content in a while and they might not be subject matter experts in every single area. So that could lead to them saying, yes, we can do that, but ultimately it could be that they're trying to jam a square peg into a round hole, and ultimately you probably don't want that. So to me, content is number one. Number two is proof of concept. And when I talk about proof of concept, I'm really talking about how is the work actually applied during the actual training itself. And I'm not referring to just role playing. Role playing in itself is not enough. That usually does not convert into application beyond training. So whether you choose to invest in-person training or live virtual training, whether it be prospecting by phone, email, LinkedIn, social selling, time management training, qualifying skills, negotiating, objection handling, whatever it might be, you want to make sure that the work is actually applied during the training itself. Otherwise, it usually does not convert beyond the initial workshop. Okay, criteria three is leadership support and involvement. If your managers and team leaders and leadership are not vested in the training, if they are not on board with the work, unfortunately, it is very unlikely to convert into application beyond the initial training. So there's two pieces of criteria that we suggest. At a bare minimum, a coaching guide should be provided to each manager, but ideally, a dedicated manager training session should be offered to the managers directly. Criteria four is sustainability. And what I mean by sustainability is this. A one-day workshop in itself usually does not yield much ROI long-term. The trainer themselves can be fantastic. They can be very powerful in the room. And unless the trainer is totally off their game that day, most people get something out of a one-day event. The problem with that, though, is that because we're such creatures of habit as people, we typically need some follow-up or some support in order to change our habits in terms of what we're doing. And it doesn't really result in much ROI from a long-term perspective. I was actually in a meeting a little while back with the VP of sales, and she said to me that she was sick and tired of these one-day workshops, that her organization was very famous for checking a box and it didn't really convert into application beyond the training. And so you want to make sure that whether you are investing in qualifying skills training, you want to make sure that there is follow-up there. You want to make sure that the ROI is going to be pretty clear. From an internal perspective, who is going to be the internal champion, who is going to be responsible for converting this work and supporting the work, setting up the follow-up sessions and so forth. You want to make sure that the work resonates. How do we know that it's a win, and overall over what period of time? So if we're going to invest X amount of dollars, how do I know that the ROI is there and over what period of time? And that really stems from a sustainability standpoint. A one-day workshop usually doesn't result in much long-term. Okay, criteria 5 is ROI, and this is a dicey one in our industry. Most organizations will talk to it and they say they can provide it, but I'm talking about, are they able to calculate it? And when you ask the question, well, what type of ROI can I expect from this training? If they respond with something along the lines of, well, what's the cost to your business if you don't do it? You might want to keep looking, because you could end up just checking a box. And I encourage that when you look at a company out there, instead of just sourcing a vendor, take a look at an organization that wants to be a business partner with you as opposed to just another vendor. And so that's criteria 5. Criteria 6 is train the trainer. The train the trainer option historically has been really more applicable to organizations that have global presence, multiple offices across the world, multiple languages, and so forth. So even if in your current state, the train the trainer option is not really the most viable option because you don't have the headcount or the requirement to certify a person to train your work, having this option available really speaks to the scalability and how transferable the work is. And so that's criteria number 6, is to consider, do they actually offer a train the trainer option? Okay, criteria 7 is the facilitator themselves. There are some really great dynamic speakers out there. The problem, however, is that there are several of them who don't actually apply the work themselves, that they are career facilitators, they are career trainers. And while they might be a dynamic speaker, and while they might know the work inside and out, when it comes to a credibility standpoint, if your sales representatives know and understand that the person training them doesn't actually apply the work themselves, there could be credibility issues. So we encourage that you engage with an organization that has a facilitator to roll up their sleeves, that actually applies the work themselves, just like they would be coaching your salespeople to do themselves directly. So that is criteria 7. Criteria 8 is offering online training. Online training really is critical these days. I don't know anybody who really feels that online training is the way to go. The preferred in most cases is live in person, because the reality is that there's no substitute for being in the room. But look, there's a lot of factors that go into it. You have to get people on a plane. People have families. You have to try and coordinate calendars, and the expense that goes along with live in-person training, not only flying your people around, but also flying the trainers around, can get up there. And most companies these days really operate on a bit of a shoestring budget. And so having the online content available to either stand alone as its own offering or to complement any live in-person or live virtual training really is a must here as well. So that is criteria number 8. Criteria 9, and the last one, is mindset. And so there is a lot of options out there for you from a mechanic standpoint. How do you prospect by phone? How do you email? How do you use social media? How do you use LinkedIn? From a perspective of what to do once you're in, how do you qualify? How do you write business proposals? How do you overcome objections? How do you negotiate? How do you close? There's a lot of options out there for you. And they're all good and they're all necessary. But mechanics alone usually is not enough. If the company that you are engaging does not offer a component on mindset, that could be a problem for you. And if I think about our business itself, we can teach a salesperson how to make contact with a decision maker. We can teach how to send out an effective email, how to connect with a decision maker on LinkedIn, which is important. The mechanics are critical. But without the right mindset, if they don't believe their activity is important, if they don't believe this person should want to talk to me, if they don't believe in their value proposition, as soon as they encounter resistance, they usually will crumble at the knees. And it's no different with any type of training platform out there. So mindset is criteria number 9, absolutely critical. And so there you have it. There are our 9 criterias. Make sure that when you are engaging with an organization, do your best to make sure that they check as many boxes as possible, because the reality is that there's no shortage of options for you. If you have an interest in speaking to us, here's our contact information. I would welcome a phone call with you. And as per usual, I appreciate your time.